Hey everybody, it's Aluna Michaels, excuse me, Esoteric Astrologer, coming at you to talk about the events of December 2020. Something I always forget to mention is if you're interested in gift certificates, let me know. You can email me, text me, find me on the YouTube, little comments and stuff. Same idea of getting a reading for yourself, because I know people are having a lot of challenges right now, but there's definitely some good news to talk about in December. So let's see where to start. Let's talk about first the planets Jupiter and Saturn moving into Aquarius. Now, Jupiter has a 12-year orbit and Saturn has roughly a 30-year orbit. So they're both going to move into Aquarius. Earlier this year, Saturn went into Aquarius for a little bit, because you know how planets go forward, and then they go backward, then they go forward again, because of that we're all moving around the sun, so it gives the optical illusion of going backwards. So we had that Saturn pop into Aquarius for a few months in the spring and summer, and then Jupiter almost went into Aquarius but didn't, just the very end of Capricorn. But now they're actually both going in, and they're both going in like within days of each other. So Jupiter moves in, Saturn is roughly the 16th of December and Jupiter the 19th of December. And then they conjunct, which means be the exact same as. Now, pretty much all through the month of December, they're close enough to be a conjunction, it's just the mathematical exact thing is like December 20th. But so for half of the month, they're conjuncting in Capricorn, then they both move to Aquarius, and they're kind of still traveling together in Aquarius. So, Jupiter is a principle of expansion and a lot of acceptance and tolerance. Saturn is contraction, and it's more hard-lined generally. And this can be good and not good when you have conjunctions. I mean, the good thing about Saturn and Jupiter together is it's striving for a balance of not, sometimes Jupiter can be too accepting, but like, sure, and not a lot of critical thinking. Saturn sometimes can be obviously too much critical thinking and not enough openness. So, it's good to have the balance, because sometimes people think just Jupiter's the best and Saturn stinks, but they need each other. They need each other to balance, So in that way, the conjunction is good. And also it's saying, like, if you live in the United States, it's like, okay, here's Jupiter be seen as liberals and Saturn conservatives, and it's like, but we have to be together, and how are we going to do this in the month of December? Obviously, November's been weird too. But it can show healing and connection between those two principles of, the right and the left, and expansion, contraction, coming together. Sometimes when they come together, it can feel like, no, I'm not going to expand, Saturn says. No, I'm not going to wheel it in, like Jupiter says. But I'm hoping that as those guys go into Aquarius, because the Capricorn can be more that standoff of like, hell no, But when they go into Aquarius, it's like, all right, what do you have to offer me? The best part of Aquarius is that, Aquarius is at its highest and best. Principles of humanitarianism, and you don't need to be the same as me for me to accept you. We don't have to all sort of boil ourselves down to a lowest common denominator to appreciate each other. Like, we're humans and we both have noses, therefore we can appreciate each other. No, we could go bigger than that. Like, wow, you're really different from me. That's interesting. You have different religion or different opinion or different lifestyle. It's like, cool, we live in the same neighborhood or the same state or the same country or the same planet. Interesting, And it's like variety, the spice of life kind of thing with Aquarius. So that can be the best thing about, how do we all get along, appreciate each other, and even if we don't, how do we just go, that's okay, I guess, So to have Jupiter and Saturn shift like that from Capricorn into Aquarius, because sometimes when those planets are at the end, like Saturn's been in Capricorn for 2.5 years, Jupiter just for a year, but it gets kind of like, Capricorn, this is the sign I'm leaving. And then it's like, ooh, Aquarius, this is kind of cool. And for both of them to just be like fresh-minded, I think it really bodes well for connecting the opposites and appreciating each other somehow, some way. So I'm not saying Aquarius is the best because, in a year when we're talking about Jupiter going into Pisces, Jupiter feels a little tired of being Aquarius at that point. It's like, all right, let's go. Let's get something new. So it's just those final degrees of any sign is like, let's do something new. So that's going to be very refreshing to have the Jupiter and Saturn change signs. Then we also have a total solar eclipse, and that's going to be happening on the 14th. So we've got the eclipse on the 14th, and then the Jupiter and Saturn changing signs the 16th and the 19th, and then the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on the 20th. So all that's kind of like a cool period of time there. Now, the interesting thing about the total solar eclipse is it's at a new moon, and the sun and the moon both in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, so we're back into this Jupiter idea. So the concept of tolerance and is generally a positive Jupiter thing. Sometimes, like I was saying, the bad part of Jupiter is like, I have a lot of Jupiter in my chart, and I remember I said to this friend of mine, it was in my 20s, we were talking about something, people being closed-minded or racist or something, and I said, I can't believe how closed-minded they are. I said, everyone should be tolerant like me. And then I just started laughing because it just was a kind of heavy Jupiter in your chart thing to say, just like, I'm intolerant of those that are intolerant. So it's like, so sometimes Jupiter gets on a high horse, and too much Sagittarius can do that. So that's something to look out for at that eclipse. But the best thing about it is to, again, notice, when are you like, I'm the best, and you stink, and you better be like me, and that kind of bossy part of Sagittarius/Jupiter. Instead to say, remember the inclusive, I don't have to be hammering people with my opinion. But, I feel like, again, there's this fresh energy about a new moon eclipse that says, especially because the sun represents your integrity. And in a lot of ways, Jupiter does too. Jupiter and the sun are very similar in a lot of ways because of their expansiveness and gaseousness as planets. And so this idea of like sticking with your integrity. And what is your integrity? And like, again, if I'm saying, everyone should be as tolerant as me, and it's like, am I being tolerant? So the eclipse and these planets changing signs, the Jupiter and the Saturn, all that, to say, am I really living from my principles? And then am I allowing other people to live from their principles? And to allow others the honor and respect to have their opinion, which can be challenging when those opinions are very different. And again, we get into that kind of multicultural, multi-idea world, and how do we all exist in the same world is the big paradox of Jupiter. And even of Aquarius, because in another way, this is going to confuse you, but the sun and Jupiter are similar from this like big-heartedness kind of part. Jupiter and Uranus, the planet that represents Aquarius, are kind of similar in the sense of being forerunners or inclusive and stuff like that. So this whole thing of introducing the Aquarius sign, it's like, how do we have that integrity, expand it to others, and keep maintaining integrity while we're moving ideas forward into the future to create a better future for everybody, not just my group, kind of thing, which is, again, the bad part of Jupiter. That's the bad part of Uranus and Aquarius as well sometimes. So the other thing is that Venus is going into Venus is going into Sagittarius December 15, and that does help, again, with Venus is the planet of love, and Sagittarius is one of those inclusive signs because it's linked with that Jupiter. So, it's boding well for the middle of the month to be more inclusive and peaceful and cooperative. The one hitch, which is funny because I think this may be more of a personal deal, is that the week of, Christmas or, let's say the 23rd to the 26th, the planet Mars is going to square the planet Pluto. And squares are challenging angles. And Mars, well, Pluto was like Mars's big brother. You know, they both kind of represent kind of feeling frustrated or angry or power. And so being with family, if you're gonna be, even if you're doing a Zoom over holiday times, whatever holidays you choose to celebrate around the end of December, you know, people could get edgy. And I think it's almost like with all of that Sagittarius, Jupiter, Aquarius, there's kind of like a thing about the whole world, and maybe I can like relax about the whole world. But if like your uncle says something, or your dad, or your cat says something, you know, you can feel like, oh, them's fighting words, you know, with that Mars Pluto. So just kind of watching like your day-to-day interactions with people, like your frustrations could just spill over even with people in your household or with yourself. You can be irritated. And so it's kind of a time to think before you speak. Even if you're doing something like self-improvement, like I want to eat well this holidays, and you just think, oh, I'm grabbing for the second piece of pie. Like, well, let me wait on my actions and wonder, why am I doing this? And do I need to do this? Do I need to say this? Do I need to think this? It's like just this hot-tempered kind of time. It's just for a few days, you know. But another thing could be like frustrations that you didn't get enough done this year, and you had all that extra time because you were working from home and this kind of stuff. It's like just allowing some gentleness to be there. And say, one of the things I didn't say about the Jupiter and Saturn conjunction over this whole month of December is it's really good for setting goals. And for, you know, you want to set the goal, which is the Saturn in a way of like, and then saying, how will I achieve that goal? And Jupiter's a goal from the sense of like what I could accomplish and dreaming it up. But Saturn helps give the dream legs. So it's really good for planning things that aren't just, you know, pie in the sky, impossible, disappointing type New Year's resolutions. But what is really truly important to me? Is it really a priority to do it? How will I take the steps? When will I take them by? And have a gentleness around it, which is, again, going back to the Jupiter. The Saturn sets the pace and everything. The Jupiter gives some sort of peacefulness around it and self-compassion. So that's another thing we can use the Jupiter and Saturn for. So, okay. So again, if you need me, alunamichaels.com. I've got my book, the 12 Spiritual Gifts of the 12 Astrological Signs. It's available on Amazon Kindle. And you know, the gift certificates, whatever you need. Hopefully I can help with that. And hang in there. 2020 is almost over. I think it's going to be better even before we get into 2020. Those Aquarius planets are going to feel really good. It's going to be surprising, too, who comes out of the woodwork to support opposite sides and make space for people. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be, I'm very hopeful about it. We'll talk more about that in January, of course. Okay, so bye for now.